Hi girls, it's Bree. Hope you're all okay. So last week was my 1 year travel versary. I know that's so lame, but I make like anniversary celebrations out of everything. So I'm sure those of you who already follow us know that already. And I put up all of my travelling highlights on our story, and so many of you are so sweet to message and to ask about, you know, how we planned it and things like that. So I thought I would record a YouTube video. I'm in no means like a travelling expert. I have travelled to quite a few countries. I think last time I checked I've been to 40, but I'm in no kind of way or form like a travelling expert. But I've kind of put together my top tips that I used when I planned my travelling trip, and hopefully some of you girls will find it useful too. Okay, so the first thing to think about is where you want to go. Now, I know this sounds really obvious, but it's actually a really hard job trying to narrow down where you want to go to and what your time span is. So for us, we had, well, me and my boyfriend together had just under 3 months, and then I stayed on because my family then were going to come out and join me, and we then carried on, I think, for like 3 weeks. So in total, my trip was about 3.5 months. It sounds like a lot of time, but I promise you, when you actually start, A, it goes really quickly, and B, you realise obviously the world is so big, and even trying to get from one place to the other, that takes like 1 to 2 days of your time, so you have to take that into consideration. So my boyfriend and I like made a list of the countries we wanted to go to. So I actually really wanted to do Central America. Ange and I have actually done South America when we were at dental school for our elective. I loved it, and I wanted to go back and do Central America. My boyfriend really wanted to do more of Asia, so we compromised and we basically did Asia. And then literally what we did was we like got up Google Maps and like literally got like a world map up, and we literally just like looked at the countries that were there and looked at the ones that, you know, either we'd heard of that had been like, you know, really, really amazing to travel, or we knew people who'd already traveled there and they said it was incredible, or just ones that sounded cool. So I kind of wanted to do like Vietnam, Cambodia type of thing, but my boyfriend's already done that. So we tried to pick countries that we hadn't done so it could be a new experience for us both. So the countries we ended up picking were Dubai, and that was more just like as a kind of stop off kind of on the way to Japan. We spent like 5 days there, but it was nice because my friend lives there, so it was nice to see him, and also it was nice to break up the long journey and the jet lag and things like that. So we did Dubai, Japan, Malaysia, and also Borneo, which is an island off of Malaysia, which is really famous for like nature and things like that. Singapore, Hong Kong, Philippines, Fiji, the Cook Islands, and also really randomly Brunei, which is a really tiny country, and we literally just went there for a day, but we ticked it off our list. So that was basically the decision we came to. Now obviously whatever you pick is going to be really personable to yourself, so whatever, like I said, you've heard of or people have told you about, just make sure you've researched into it. I looked at a lot of travel blogs, and I looked at a lot of, you know, like when you Google online, like traveling in X, Y, and Z, there's so many like websites that come up with people that have traveled there and their experiences. And I think that really helped us to narrow things down. So whatever kind of area of the world, definitely speak to people and research and come up with a list. One more thing I'd say is when you are kind of making your list of places to go, just like bear in mind that like you are going to be tired, and I know it sounds really silly because you're like on an extended holiday, but traveling does take it out of you. Like you're carrying big bags, you are going from country to country, the time differences are different, you know, you're on the go because a lot of these places you're only spending like 3 or 4 days in, so you want to make the most and you want to like see everything. So although it's great to feel like, oh my god, I've got 3 months, let's pack clothes in, just bear in mind that you are going to need like some relaxation like in between those things. So don't overdo it either, because even with us, I think it was like chilled at the beginning, then it was like non-stop for the middle, and then it was like chilled at the end. And I think in hindsight I wish I'd put in some like destinations or some rest days to just do nothing, because that bit was like, yeah, it was very draining. So bear that in mind as well. We did about 10 countries in 3 months, so I think that's doable, but you have to be aware that, for example, Singapore, Hong Kong that we did was like 3 days each, so we didn't spend like weeks and weeks there. So again, take that into consideration, because cities, you know, city type countries, you won't need as much time, whereas bigger countries where there's lots of nature and lots of different areas like Malaysia and the Philippines and Japan, like you will need at least, like, at the very minimum 2 weeks, because these countries are huge and they take, like I said, a day to get from one end to the other, if not longer. So yeah, that's the first thing, to figure out where you want to go. Okay, so second thing I got asked a lot of last week when I put up my highlights was budgeting, how we budgeted, how much it cost. I never normally like talk about money on Ange and I's blog, like it's just not something we do, but obviously I know that a lot of you will want to know about budgeting. So I saved up around £10,000 for this trip, just obviously for myself, and then my boyfriend also saved up £10,000. So that's obviously a lot of money. I knew that although I wanted to go travelling and have the whole experience, I've done the whole, you know, fully backpacking, fully in hostels thing when we did South America at uni, and it was amazing, but I was 21 then, and I kind of felt like I have been working for a few years, you know, I have been working really hard, and especially the year before I went travelling, I worked really hard, did extra shifts and things like that. So I kind of wanted to also like treat myself. So like we saved that much, but that was for everything. So that was flights, that was food, that was activities, so things like getting out paddy, like diving qualification, climbing mountains, you know, all that stuff, that included all of that. Which, to be fair, like, again, it sounds like a lot, but considering you're away for 3 months, and you know, some of the places we went to, like for example Japan, trying to get flights there sometimes cost between £1,000 to £1,500. So I mean, if you take that into consideration, and we think we must have taken about 40 flights, like including internals, so actually all in all it's not actually that bad. What I did was like every month put X amount towards your budget, so that way nearer the time you don't feel like, oh my god, I really don't have enough to go. So start saving like even a year before and just put a little amount in every month, and it makes such a difference. I would also say to always over save. So although I budgeted like £10,000 and that was like my budget, and I really didn't want to go over it, I also, you know, you can't control certain things. Sometimes when you get out there things cost more, or like sometimes you have to change flights, or you know, whatever. So I had like backup money saved as well, so that if I needed to, I could go into that. So that's another thing to make sure that you're aware of, to save your budget but also have extra just in case things go wrong. And I mean, hopefully you won't have to use it, so at least when you come back from traveling you've got some money to kind of keep you going till you get paid next. So yes, that's how much kind of we saved. To be completely honest with you, I think you could do it in a lot less. I think if you choose countries which are a little bit, I wouldn't, not cheaper, but like cheaper to get around and cheaper to kind of do activities in. So obviously countries like Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia are known to be a bit cheaper, whereas we did some kind of luxury destinations towards the end, like Fiji and the Cook Islands, which again, to get there alone took like 24 hours. And you know, it's all very resorty, and like a lot of people go there for honeymoons, so obviously like places like that are going to be more expensive. So I think completely depending what your budget is, obviously tailor your trip towards that. If you want to do more of a hostel kind of trip, then that's completely fine. You can do it in a lot less. You can probably do it in half of that if you're really good, and you know, you stay in hostels, you stay in shared rooms, you don't, you know, you have street food rather than going to like fancy restaurants and things. So I think it just completely depends what you want, and I think once you know your budget, you can then tailor when you're planning your trip, like what you want to get out of it. Another thing I want to mention about finances is how to like sort your money out. So my boyfriend and I both got like travel credit cards, and at the time when we went, the best ones were the Barclay card one and the Halifax Clarity one. That might have changed like since, but that's what we found. And if you're not sure, if you go on Money Supermarket and then type in like best abroad credit, like best credit cards to use abroad, or like best traveling credit cards, it will basically go through the top 10 and give you like the pros and cons of each one. So try and get one of those, and then basically like put your money on that. These cards are really good because they allow you to withdraw cash, and they also obviously allow you to spend on them. Now luckily these days most places you go to will all take cards, so you should generally be fine. But what we did, every time we got to a new country, we would go straight to an ATM or a bank and then withdraw like, I don't know, like £100 worth of cash just to use on like cabs, or like street food or like souvenir shops just to have on you, because the worst thing you can have is be somewhere where no one can really speak English and you need to find a cash point, you don't know where a cash point is. And there were a few times where that happened to us, where we just like had run out of money, and then we kind of learned. And to be honest, as the trip went on, if we knew we were going somewhere a bit more rural, you know, like especially like when we were staying in the jungle or when we were staying in the mountains or like things like that where there's no technology, we made sure we would go like the day before and get like a fair amount of cash out. So yeah, you use both basically, but 100% use a credit card. It also helps you to kind of make sure you're staying within budget, helps you to track it a bit easier than cash. So yeah, so that's a really, really good shout. Okay, so next step, once you've figured out the countries you want to go to and you've figured out the budget of how much you roughly want to spend, obviously the next step is to try and book it. Now, again, everyone's different. We booked our trip as in actually paid for the flights, I think 5 months in advance. Yeah, about 5 months in advance. If you can do it earlier, obviously great, but we were still like toying between like dates and like, you know, places and trying to fit in as much as we could. So we did it, yeah, the Christmas before we went. We used the flight centre. Now, I've had such good experience with the flight centre. We used them when Ange and I and our best friend went to South America in uni, and they were just really, really organised. They sorted everything out for us. So I wanted to use them again. Highly recommend it. They sorted out our whole itinerary. They, you know, jiggled things around so that we weren't waiting in airports too long for transfer flights. They made sure, for example, for me, that I had vegetarian meals on all the planes. We did compare like flight prices on Skyscanner and things like that. And if at any point when we were booking we felt like we found it cheaper, we would just show our agent we were dealing with, and then she would reduce the price to match it. So they're really, really good at price matching. So I would 100% recommend Flight Centre. At least get a quote from them. I mean, if you find it cheaper, you do, but we didn't, and I think they did a really good deal for us. So yeah, so once you've like kind of sorted all of that out, then go ahead and sort of book your flights. We only booked our like international flights, so our country to country to country flights. We didn't book any of our internals because at this point, 5 months before, we hadn't got an exact itinerary of like how long we wanted to spend in one area versus another. So we didn't book internals. But the good thing is internals in like Asia especially, like they're really easy to book. They're like £20. You can book them like on the day that you want to go. Like the airports are like the size of a house. Like it's a really minor thing as opposed to like, you know, like big international flights. So don't worry about the internals unless you know, like for example, you definitely want to spend like 6 days here no matter what, and then you want to go somewhere, then fine. But otherwise I think internals you can just book later on, or you can just book when you're there, because like I said, so much changes when you're there. Like, you know, you might be somewhere and the weather might not be great, and then you didn't get the chance to do like an island tour, so you want to stay an extra day. So like, you know, it gives you more flexibility in that respect. Okay, so once you've now sorted out your country you're going to, sorted out your budget, booked your external flights, the next thing that we did was to sort out our accommodation. Now again, a lot of you, like, you know, you might want to do that when you're there, and to be fair, some of it we did do when we were there. So what we actually did before we went, we organised probably the first 6 weeks worth of like accommodations, and then we kind of did the rest as we went along. Now a lot of people don't know whether to stay in like a hotel or like a hostel. It's really personal preference. Like I said again, like Anjay and our friend Jamie, like we did the hostel thing in South America and it was amazing. It was so much fun. We made loads of friends. Like, you know, we did it all then. I just kind of wanted a little bit more of a, I wouldn't even say luxury trip because we weren't staying in luxury hotels for the majority, but just kind of a little bit less of a 100% backpack trip. So we stayed in the majority of hotels, but in a few places like the Philippines, we stayed in hostels that had amazing reviews and were on the beachfront, and you know, were really social, so you can meet people. So we did do a mix. To be fair, like even hotels, especially in Asia, are pretty cheap, so there wasn't like a huge price difference, but what I would advise, even if you are like in hostels, then I would advise every so often, like every few weeks or every week or two, book yourself into a hotel, because you'll need that like R&R time where you'll need your own space, you'll need like your nice own bathroom, like, you know, like you'll just need that, like especially when you're on the go and you're tired and you know you're not getting a full 8 hours sleep and you're jet lagged and X, Y and Z, like you will need it. So that's what kind of we did. So in some places like I don't know, like in Kuala Lumpur and in Hong Kong, we like booked like ourselves into really nice hotels, and then in other places, like even around Japan and in the Philippines, we stayed in more like basic hotels or in hostels. So it was a nice mix between the two. But like I said, if you are on more of a budget, then 100% look into hostels and look into things like shared rooms. Shared rooms in hostels, for those of you that haven't travelled, are basically like, there's like 5 or 6 bunk beds in there, and there's like travellers from all across the world that are all staying in this one room. You've got lockers where you put your stuff, so you lock it all in there, and it's obviously very social, but you are essentially sharing a room with like 9 or 10 other strangers. Although that being said, there are also private rooms in hostels. That's also what my boyfriend and I did. If we were like staying in one place just for one night, before we had to catch a flight, then we'd stay in like a hostel in like a private room. And again, some of them were like really nice, really clean, very similar to hotels. So just do your research and look at reviews, and that will help you. But whether you stay in a hotel or hostel, again, depends on your budget and what you prefer. But either way, I would advise you to treat yourself every so often to somewhere really nice, because you'll need it. And okay, so my next point is, once you've done everything I've said so far, is to then start thinking about what you want to do in each area. Now, I'm not saying you have to like make like a hour by hour itinerary for each day, although the Monica in me actually really wanted to do that, but my boyfriend stopped me. It just means that you have to do a bit of research into each of the countries and like what the main things are to do this. There's so much information out there, and we're so lucky in that respect. So a few key things that I knew I really wanted to do was, I really wanted to learn to dive and get my PADI qualification, and I also really wanted to climb Mount Kinabalu in Borneo. And I also wanted to dive with sharks in Fiji. Like, there was a few key things pretty much in every country that I knew I wanted to do, and they weren't all like physical things. For example, in Japan, I knew that I wanted to go to the robot restaurant. Like, for example, in Borneo, I knew I wanted to go and see the orangutans and things like that. Like, I had an idea of what I wanted to do. Now, the reason that I think it's important not to wing some of these things is because a lot of these things require pre-planning. So, for example, in Japan, we did this thing called like Mario Kart race driving. So for those of you who haven't been, essentially it's like being in Mario Kart but in real life. So you're in these little like go-karts, but you're driving like legit on the road, like next to moving traffic. I'll try and insert like a picture or a video somewhere. So you're in these little carts, and you're literally driving on the real roads in real traffic. And before you can do it, A, you need to book like a couple of months in advance, and B, you need to also have a international driving license. So I know so many people that have said they've gone to Japan, they tried to do the Mario Kart thing, and then they realised they didn't have an international driving licence, because you have to get it in the UK. So you have to go to your post office, you have to apply for it and get it before you go. So again, things like that, if we hadn't researched and booked before, we wouldn't have been able to have done it. So that's really important. Even like PADI, for example, you need to have like a medical check. If you've got any sort of conditions, you need to get your GP to sign you off to say you're fit to dive. Otherwise, the diving company won't take you. If you want to climb a mountain, you need to make sure that you've got hiking boots, and you've got the things that you need for it. So it's really, really important to research, because I feel like it's such a waste if you've gone all the way there and then you can't do these things that are like amazing once in a lifetime opportunities. So whatever your activities are, whatever your interests are, just make sure you have done your research beforehand. Although I'm not saying to plan it like day by day and hour by hour, just make sure per country the 5 things you want to do there, so that at least you've kind of got a little bit of structure, and then for the rest of it you can just like wing it. Okay, so the next thing to prepare after doing all of the above is electronics, and this sounds like a really random one, and I don't know if I'm biased because my dad is in IT, so we have like everything really niftily sorted out for us because of him. But just things like, obviously you're going on this amazing trip, you want to make sure that you've got like a camera, whether that's your phone camera or like for those of you who are into photography, like an SLR, you've got something to video on. Now again, if you do a lot of activities, 100% I'd recommend a GoPro or something of that equivalent, which is small, which is waterproof, which you can take on the mountains, in the sea, like everywhere, because obviously I'm not saying you should video every single thing, but some of these things you may not ever get to do again. So definitely look into getting something like that. and again, it's something you can carry on using in your future trips, so it's a good investment. Another thing that we did, which again you don't have to do, but we took like a little mini laptop with us, and we took a hard drive. So on this hard drive was like loads of movies, loads of TV shows, and also loads of space. So we would back up our GoPro pictures and videos, we'd back up things on our phone, because you know, you never know when you can lose your phone or lose your camera. And also just to create space, because the worst thing when you go to take a picture and then it's like files full, please delete. Every country we went to, at the end of it, we would just back it up onto our hard drive. And I know a lot of people who went traveling did a similar thing, because you just don't want to risk losing it. And also with regards to having the mini laptop, like it just came in so useful, because we actually rewatched Game of Thrones from the beginning, and it was like our little treat, like you know, like if we wanted a quiet night in, or if we were like on a plane going somewhere, and often the little planes don't really have any sort of entertainment, or if we were like waiting at the airport for like transfers and things like that, like it came in so useful. So would really recommend you girls investing in that. Like you know, for those of you who have tablets or iPads, similar thing. Another thing with regards to electronics is make sure that your phones that you take, whatever you take, is unlocked, because every country we went to, the first thing we did was we went to the airport and we bought a SIM. So then we could use that for calling, we could use it for internet. They generally weren't that expensive, and I would 100% recommend it, because you know, especially our generation, we're so reliant on technology, and you know, we use that for everything, for Google Maps, for TripAdvisor, like, you know, for Uber, because a lot of these countries have Uber or their Asian equivalent. So we use it for everything, and I don't think we would have got on as well without that. So yeah, definitely would recommend unlocking your phone before you go as well, getting a GoPro, taking some sort of tablet, mini laptop, and taking a hard drive to back everything up onto, and to just, like I said, have some shows and things on that you guys can watch, because it is a long time and there is a lot of traveling time and waiting around time and things like that, so it comes in really useful. And okay, so my next point is quite a minor point but also important. So just make sure, number one, you have your vaccines done. Check in advance what requirements you need. I didn't actually need to get any extra ones, because I'd got some for South America, and I'd also got some for Africa, where I went I think a couple of years ago, so I'd kind of got all the ones I needed. But it's really important you just check and you leave enough time to like book in appointments to go and get it done, rather than like rushing the week before, because it's really hard to try and get appointments with travel nurses and clinics and things like that. So just look into it, get it booked and sorted before. And speaking of things to book before, also insurance is so important, especially for like a long trip like this. So many things can go wrong, so many flights can get cancelled, things can get, you know, lost or broken or stolen or whatever, so you need to get a really good level of insurance cover. But whoever you use, just make sure that they know you're going for a long time, they know the countries you're going to, and also any of you who are doing activities, check the fine print, because a lot of the basic kind of insurance packages say like mountain hikes, diving, but then it will say in like small writing like only to 10 meters or only to whatever feet. So again, just check, because I had to check how high the mountain was that I was climbing, and it actually wasn't, it was actually higher than the total height on the insurance. So I had to call them and ask them to like put me onto the next level of cover. So it's really important to read the fine print. And the same with diving, like majority of insurances that cover you will say to 10 meters, but for PADI you go up to like 18, and if you do your next PADI you go up to like 30. So like you need to just again be sure so you're fully covered. Okay, so next point is quite a minor point, just about food. I just want to say that, you know, whether you're a fussy eater, not a fussy eater, like just make sure you enjoy the food and try all the cuisines, especially try the street food, because that's where like the best kind of authentic food of that country generally is. We did a mix, so some days we literally ate like street food off the market, and you know, like sitting outside in KL at the food markets, which kind of look like a bigger, slightly more civilized version of the Thailand food markets. Some days we dressed up and we went to nice places, so we did a mix. But like I said, if you're on a budget, you're going to probably eat more street foods or like kind of little cafe type things. If you're kind of splurging, then there's so many nice restaurants, especially in places like the main cities like Tokyo, Singapore, Hong Kong, like incredible fine dining there as well. So, you know, if you can, do a mix, but if you're on a budget, then street food is still so tasty and, like I said, a true representation of the countries. Just be aware if you've got any dietary requirements, again, just look into it before. So I'm vegetarian, for those of you that don't already know. To be honest, I think being vegetarian, I feel like you're just used to not having as many choices when you're abroad, so you're not like as phased. The only country that I really struggled in, I'd say, is probably Japan, because obviously they have a lot of sushi, it's very fish based, but then all we had to do was just look into kind of TripAdvisor reviews, and they're so helpful, and just kind of try and find vegetarian like friendly restaurants. And again, one of my friends lives there, so she was also really good at giving recommendations, and just try and speak to people. Just be aware of that and like look into that before you go. But I think that shouldn't be a limiting factor, and you should, where you can, just try everything. But if you do have any sort of specific allergies or requirements, I'd probably advise, especially in countries like Japan where they don't speak any English, to get some sort of translated sentence which says I'm allergic to, or I have this requirement, just to be safe, because it's not like when you go on holiday in Europe and, you know, you go to a normal resort and they all speak English and they all know what a nut allergy is, or they all know what gluten-free is. Like, just be aware of that as well. Oh, I also forgot to say one more thing, which is we did like supermarket shops like quite a lot. We like didn't ever really stay anywhere when there was a kitchen, but we'd always like stock up on snacks, because it's so important to have like cereal bars, crisps, nuts and things like that, which you can have again if you're on the go, if you're traveling a lot, or, you know, if you haven't got time to stop for food. So that's also a really good point to add in the whole food section as well. Okay, so my next one, sorry guys, it's such a long video, I'm literally almost at the end, but hopefully you're finding this useful, because I feel like if I had watched this last year, I'd be like, oh my god, that's so useful. I don't know if I'm being biased. Anyway, the next thing, so I got asked this so much about packing and my outfits, and how did I take so much, and like how did I look so glam when traveling. So I mean, I actually invited my best friend round before I left, and bless her soul, she sat here with me for like, I'd say about 8 hours. I still had stuff that I wanted to take that I couldn't fit in, so I literally put that in my boyfriend's suitcase. So we actually used suitcases. Again, when I went to South America, we used backpacks, and it was very much, we took like 5 sets of clothes. They were all from like Primark basics, like t-shirts and leggings, and we just like washed, wore, and then when we came home we just chucked it all. So again, for me, I did have clothes like that. I had like trampy clothes in there, but I also felt like some of the places we were going to, like cities and stuff, like, you know, like Tokyo and Singapore and Kuala Lumpur and all this stuff, like when there are nice hotels and there are nice restaurants and things, like I did want to take like nice stuff, so I did take a couple of heels, I did take nice dresses, but for the most of it I did just take lots of shorts and t-shirts. It's really important to research into the weather, because especially if you're doing things like I said, like mountains, or any sort of activities where the weather might drastically change. So I had to take, for example, a set of thermals, even though I didn't use it for the whole trip, I just used it for the mountains, but I'm so glad that I did, because it was freezing up there. So just bear that in mind, and have a look, and also have a look at things like rainy season, and, you know, see what the chances of rain are, you know, while you're there. In terms of what did I prefer, I think obviously I preferred the suitcase, because I felt like I could take more, I had accessories, you know, I had different shoes and all this stuff. But I think my boyfriend probably would have preferred, and then he actually said, like, at one point, because he was obviously the one lifting the suitcases and like wheeling them around, and I took the like little wheelies and he had the big ones, and he said, he was like, if we do this again, we're going to do backpacking, because in terms of ease, it is a lot easier to shove things in. You never have a weight issue, whereas I was always stressed that we were like overweight and trying to like move things around. It's easier for you to move as well, because you can put it on your back, and, you know, you don't have to rely on another person helping you. So yeah, in that respect, I'd probably have to do backpacking next time, because I promised him. But if you want to look fleeky, then obviously go for a suitcase, because you can just fit so much more in. Guys, like whatever you prefer, as long as you've got the main things in, as long as you remember things like medicines and like electronics and things like that, then the rest, obviously whatever you can fit in, like, is great. I'm so sorry this has taken so long. I didn't realise how much I can just go off on a tangent, but I think it's just making me feel really nostalgic, because I'm like really sad it's over and I can't believe it's been a whole year. Anyways, so my last point is planning versus winging it. I feel like for me, I think we did a bit of both, and that worked amazingly for us. Like, I am very OCD, I'm very organised, as you guys can tell by my like label making and my like room and all this stuff. Like, I am a bit OCD, and my boyfriend's very laid back, so we just compromised in that, you know, he'd always like joke and be like, why do you have to like Google the top 10 things to do in every country, and if we don't do it then you're not going to be happy, like, and I was like, I don't know, I don't want to feel like I missed out on anything with FOMO and stuff. So like, but I learned to kind of relax as the trip went on, and you know, like obviously I still had my main things I wanted to do in every place, but equally it was nice just like stumbling across like a bar, or stumbling across a restaurant, or like walking around and finding a random like monument or tourist attraction that I didn't really know about. Like, there is an element of like niceness about that and adventure, because you don't want it to be too structured, because also when it's too structured you put pressure on yourself and you're like, okay, like have to go here now, have to go there, taking too long, why is this happening, I'm behind schedule, and then you don't end up enjoying it. So I think do a mixture of both, and I think for us that worked in you know, the sense of we had booked and sorted our external flights, we had booked and sorted our accommodation for the most part, but you know, the internal flights and the day-to-day things we kind of just did as we got to each country, and you know, after speaking to people, reading some reviews, kind of just figuring it out from there. So yeah, do a bit of both, and I think you will have an amazing time. One more thing I was going to say is we took with us a travelling folder. Please appreciate my little label that I've made in my label maker, which sounds really geeky but actually came in so useful. So it literally has like our printed like flight itineraries, and then we like printed off all our like booking.com confirmations for all of our hotels for each country. So like one was Japan, obviously, one was like Philippines, and then we like printed them all out, because you'll be surprised, you'll get to a hotel and they'll be like, oh, can I have your booking number? And then you're trying to like connect to Wi-Fi, you're trying to find your emails, you've got millions of emails because you haven't been connecting to Wi-Fi, so you're trying to sort through them and it's really hard to find. So when you have this all printed, it really helps. And then we also had, what else did we have? We had our internal flights printed as well, which we printed as we went along. And then we had like our travel insurance printed just in case anything happened. We had like our medical stuff signed for our Paddy and things like that. So like it was just good to just have everything here like ready. And any of the activities we had booked beforehand, we also put in here. This was just like all the like hotel keys and like flight stuff that I've kept since, as like my little memories. But this was a really good shout to keep with you, just to kind of have everything in like in real life, because I know we rely on everything on our phone, but you, like I said, you never know when your phone breaks, you can't connect to Wi-Fi, you know, you run out of battery, so it's good to just have everything like in concrete as well. So yeah, that's kind of all of my tips, guys. I really hope that you found it useful. Sorry if I went on too much. If you have any questions, like please feel free to DM us or to comment below. Otherwise, hope you're all keeping safe, and I'm very excited for you all to plan your travelling trips.